Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Health Made Simple show. I am here with our host, Dr. Bart Precourt, who has been a healthcare practitioner for over 20 years, practicing a range of modalities, including chiropractic, kinesiology, acupuncture, functional nutrition and supplementation, and lab testing, all out of his clinic, Balance Health Studio in Seagrove Beach, Florida, as well as virtually all around the world. So he's also the founder of the Health Edge program, which is a cutting-edge health program for entrepreneurs and executives wanting to take their health to the next level. He's worked with celebrities and athletes all around the world. And tonight he's going to start off by sharing his clinical insights for the week with us.
Yeah. And those of you who aren't familiar with what my clinical insights, they're just the moments that I have like, It's like either a win or sometimes a repeated, thing that comes up in the clinic. There's so much that I get to learn, even practicing for 25 years, that I learn every day, or I see that repeating. And that's how as practitioners, a lot of times we, move in a direction of trying to help our people the best that we can. So kind of interesting conversation today. And this comes up in doctors' offices often, yet aren't talked about in the general public, not that much. And the first one's really about pooping. So there's not a lot of poop talk. I feel like over the last couple of years, it's becoming more common, or maybe it's just more common in my life. This was interesting. So a young lady comes in and shares with me that she was listening to a podcast, which is awesome. And in the podcast, the gentleman says that you should be, proper bowel movement frequencies anywhere between 1 and 3 times a day. And she goes on to tells me, says, I found that interesting. I only poop 1 time a week. And then really quickly,
1 time a week.
I know. So yeah, Karen, that surprises you, but it does not surprise me at all as a practitioner. And any other practitioners that are listening to this would agree. We hear it all the time. The challenge is getting to that conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. So real quickly, in a weird way, she's almost defended it too. So it's been what I've done ever since a little girl. This is the way it's always worked for me. This is normal. Now, if you've listened to the Health Made Simple show, some of the things I've always tried to make really simple is some of the things that should happen simple for human beings. And 2 of them are, you should sleep easily and poop easily.
Yeah.
I understand that these have become massive challenges in our culture nowadays for around the world, literally, that sleeping and pooping are big issues, and we don't talk about them enough. And so tonight I do want to shed some light a little bit about the pooping. Pooping once a week is not okay. If you're taking in,
did she feel bloated, or did she feel uncomfortable at all? Or she was just so used to feeling a bit bloated, maybe that was.
That's it, Karen. It's almost like the saying, the fish doesn't know it's in water. Many of us are living in a paradigm with our health that we're just used to, but it doesn't mean that it's optimal. It doesn't mean that we're living in this best version of our bodies that we possibly can. And I know firsthand, for me, especially gut health, and I've shared it here on the show, most of my life, I had either bloated gut or irregular bowels and just thought every other kid did it. I just thought like you ate food and later you felt like you were pregnant. Like you looked that way, your belly blew up and you just sucked it in. And that was just the consequence of eating. And I lived most of my life that way until I learned or discovered that there was other ways around it. So we had a conversation, and it was, in the beginning of that conversation, it's not an easy one. Especially when someone, and for everyone listening to this, you'll hear this as you're listening to others describe their health, and you're trying to help them in their journey, or you're trying to help yourself, is the immediate defense of that habit, of that action, or this is just the way it is, whether we're defending it with genetics, we're defending it with this is how it's always been, this is my body, this is just, and I understand that. I understand it. And sometimes it just says, well, I just don't know. So we had a really, really good conversation, me and this young lady. I say young because she's my age, so she's super young. She was 50. Totally. Yes. And we had a conversation. She said, well, where do I begin? Because she recognized too that I said, no, it's not normal. And then she was asking me about it because I think it threw her back when she was listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. The guy was really leaning toward the fact that you should eliminate 1 to 3 times per day. And the answer to that is, for everyone listening, ideally, you do have a good full clearing of the bowels daily.
Okay.
There are some people that they'll do that 3-4 days a week, and 1 or 2 days that doesn't happen, or whatever. But that on that second day, they have a complete bowel clearing. That would be the bare minimum.
Okay.
Yet, and ideally, every single day, clearing your bowels fully, 1 to 2 different evacuations, it would be an ideal world. If you happen to be 3, then no big deal.
Okay.
It's okay to do that, especially if you're eating, you know, a really clean diet and you're getting things through your body pretty well, and you have really good motility, and you haven't beat up your body, your microbiome with, you know, antibiotics over the years, et cetera. So if things are working really good, there's a chance that you move your bowels multiple times. And I know, listen,
it's also mean what it looks like when it, like if you're moving your bowels multiple times, but it's like runny, I guess, or like it's, you know, then maybe that's too many times, or
there's a little different interpretation for that. So we start with moving the bowels and getting full evacuation. That is step number 1. And then bowel kind of evaluation is worthy of us taking, you know, half of a show or a show and describing it, because people know real quickly what theirs look like. Is it firm? Does a stool look like a snake? Is it watery? Is it just a pile of mush? Is it floating? All of those matter. And I'm just going to pause those just for a moment, rather than kind of talk about where my conversation with her started, because there's a lot of people that are going to listen to this that have bowel challenges and don't know where to start. And oftentimes the commonality is, let's start with a probiotic. And that's actually not the right place to start. It's an okay thing to do. Sometimes your body can't handle it.
yeah.
So if you're having a bowel issue, you're not getting food out, most likely it means that the food that was coming in could not be broken down properly. And that's an upper GI issue. That starts number 1. So that's where, and again, we've talked so much about it on our show here, about having a good digestive enzyme, making sure that you have a good, strong stomach acids. People that don't move their bowels much often have a high carbohydrate and sugar diet, because when they eat the proteins in red meat or chicken, turkey, all the animal proteins, really heavy to them. It's really, really, really heavy. So they start to avoid those. And as we've discussed many times here, you need a stronger acid in your stomach to break down your animal proteins. So for the individuals that aren't moving their bowels, they have a digestive issue. That's where it starts. So the upper GI system, we have to make sure there's good digestive enzymes. The simplest routes, like using a little apple cider vinegar every day, fantastic. Starting to use foods that are more bitter, like arugula and kale, using those, you know, infusing those into your diet that help your digestive enzymes. And also the bitter receptors, which are a massive part of the entire GI system. So the HCl that we talk about is really just in the gut, meaning the stomach itself. But waking up these digestive receptors, we do that with bitter. So these bitter receptors. So anything bitter, ginger, all those things are really super good for us. So that's number 1. So we got to be able to break our food down, and then we need to be able to transport it out. And that typically is 2-part. You need a good car and you need a good road. All right. So the car in this scenario, we're going to talk about that being bile. Bile is what's made from the gallbladder and the liver. And in this situation, we didn't get to dive into it deep, but we're going to end up. So this is the situation in the office. She's there for essentially chiropractic and acupuncture, the stuff that I do, you know, in the office. And then now it's transformed into a consult that we're going to do Zoom, because we could dive deeper into this. Yet the little bit of information I already got, I know that this is going to turn into, we've got to help the gallbladder and the liver. That's where that bile comes from. And we got to help that. And let's just think of the bile as kind of a car, like a slippery car. That's what sprays the food so it can then slide on out. And then the actual intestines themselves, that's where we need the microbiome, the ability to absorb food. So if we can't break it down, it's going to make it very difficult to deliver it out. And if you don't have the microbiome to absorb it, that's where things just stick around in the body. So now those easy steps, no, they're easy once we know that there's a strategy for them. So for anyone out there, if you're not moving your bowels regularly, listen, there's definitely a route. And I know this much. You change the health of your gut, your life changes. It is that simple. No one's over exaggerating when they say that. When listen, I love getting fit, I love getting strong, I love make my arms more muscular, whatever. You change your gut, like none of those things really change your life. They're just cool. You change your gut health, you will change your life. You will have more energy, more brain fog goes away, that discomfort that you carry every single day. I'm so grateful that my journey has got me to this point where, my gut health has been at the best now that it's been, probably all of my life. Because I remember literally as a young boy having those challenges, and there hasn't been one thing. It's been all of these things that we discuss, good nutrition, et cetera. So that was like my major clinical insight that I wanted to share tonight. And again, if people are having challenges with bowels, we don't do well if we're toxic. And it shows up, and there's so many ways, Karen, that'll show up, and very rarely will they be put together. So arthritis is a great example of toxic bowel syndrome, meaning that your intestines are now leaking out toxins, like leaky gut, and they're so backed up, they're leaking those toxins into the body. They get down into the joints, they create an inflammatory situation, and you start to create wear and tear on the joints. And now we call that arthritis. And then maybe we need a drug or a medication for that. And it inhibits life. You walk through life with pain. And then all of these things, when you have like toxic bowel syndrome or leaky gut, now we set the stage for things like autoimmune conditions. So it's just this vicious cycle that takes place. And these were with the young lady that was with me today, and especially if she's listening here today, like there was a reason we have to have a deeper conversation. We have to recognize all these things that are going on with the body, and then start to create, strategies and how about to go, like how to go about them. And it's really not that complicated, especially for someone that's doing this type of work, functional nutrition, functional medicine. And there's a lot of us out there that are doing it now. And the reason I say it's not that difficult is because we see it every day. Like this is a real thing. This is why I want to talk about it as a clinical insight. You know what the interesting thing also about gut health is? Most people don't know how to describe improper gut health.
Okay. What do you mean?
Meaning that the majority of people, if you say, how's your gut health? They're like, fine. And there's a very limited thought process. Well, my gut health is fine if I poop, or my gut health is fine if I don't burp. Yet the idea of like that discomfort, or if I push on your belly and it's kind of achy, sore, you feel bloated, they don't really relate that.
Okay.
So,
again, we just get used to it, right?
Yeah. So I guess I bring that up because if you're listening, kind of do a gut check. I wonder, like literally a gut check, no pun intended, or pun intended. How is my gut doing? Like, does it make a lot of noise? Do I have gas? Do I burp? Do I feel like I digest my food? Do all of a sudden I have allergies that I didn't have before? Are certain foods bothering me? Whatever that may be. So that's a good way to at least assess. And there's probably a dozen or 100 different types of gut assessment tools online. And it would be worthy to check them out, because that's when, then again, if you clean up your gut, if you get a better functioning gut, it is probably the strongest anti-aging protocol that you could possibly do.
And even anxiety, mood, there's lots of stuff about how your gut health affects those types of things too.
Karen, I was listening to some research just the other day. There's a PhD doctor that works at the labs up in Wisconsin at Standard Process. And he was doing a synopsis of all the different research on magnesium in the diet. And this was fascinating work, not even supplementation. Just check this out. If the magnesium intake through dietary intake, not even taking supplements, changes up to 10%, that's enough to trigger an anxiety moment. So if you're normal eating of vegetables and fruits and whatnot, you're eating through the week, let's just say you're naturally taking 1,000, I'm just going to make up numbers, taking 1,000 milligrams through the course of the week. If that changes 10%, and all of a sudden you go on a pizza binge, And here's what's interesting is things like carbohydrates, sugar, and alcohol deplete magnesium at twice the rate. But just being deficient 10% in your magnesium is enough to trigger the onset of anxiety.
Wow.
So
crazy, huh?
Yeah, pretty wild on how much nutrition really impacts our lives.
Yeah, it really does have a big impact. And I don't think we don't realize it enough until we maybe experience something like that ourselves, like are able to clean up our diet or take it in or out and then experience some of the side effects.
I guess it just made me think of another clinical insight. One of the ladies that came in today, she's on day 8 of her cleanse. So she started a little bit later.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was interesting in this quick conversation. She said, I don't know how much I'm supposed to, and she wouldn't say the word poop, how much I'm supposed to, go or cleanse per day. She's like, but I'm cleansing 3 times a day right now. And I'm like, good. It's different for everybody.
Yeah.
And then she's like, the side effects, she's like, the interesting thing that I didn't expect is that her joints don't hurt anymore. Like she had been diagnosed with all different types of arthritis. It's literally different types. And she's like, I don't get it. For some reason, she said, the medicine you're giving me, which is not medicine, right? It's vitamins, minerals, and herbs. The medicine you're giving me is taking my arthritis pain away. And I had to rephrase that for her and let her know that no, it's not. It's helping your body do what it needs to do. And when it comes to inflammation, especially in the hands and arthritis, remember that is nutritional deficiency. That it's the farthest from the heart. It's going to get the least amount of nutrients. And if you're already depleted and you're not 20 anymore, you're having a harder time breaking down your food. You're having a harder time assimilating it, getting into your body. And then all of a sudden we flip that script and we improve the function of your gallbladder, your liver, your pancreas, and we put all those nutrients in there simultaneously. And now there's not inflammation blocking those joints, and you can get those nutrients right to them. That's how the body heals. That's spontaneous healing. Yeah. So that was another great little aha moment there.
I love that so much. Cause I don't know why it works this way for me, but whenever I'm not eating clean, like my back hurts. It's like the first place that hurts. It's like one of the first things. It's not, I get this back pain that I used to get all the time. Like first time I remembered getting back pain was when I was 13, 14. I used to work in a checkout in Safeway. It used to kill me, but I'm 14. You should be able to work a checkout and not have this sore back. But took until I was 30 to do enough of a elimination protocol to really be cleanse, to be oh, wait a minute. Light bulb moment. When I take out a bunch of this stuff, my back doesn't hurt anymore.
Yeah, really fascinating. And then shortly after that, we can slide from here, but shortly after that, I had a gentleman in, and we were talking about that. And he was talking about how he was getting such great results with the adjustments and whatnot. And he said, man, I wish you could do something for my hands. And I said, what's going on with your hands? He said, every morning I wake up and I can barely even close my hands. And dogs. He said, I can barely close. I said, well, that's an easy fix. We just have to get you off of carbohydrates, gluten, and sugar. And he goes, well, I guess I'm going to have hand pain. Yeah. So interesting enough, different choices, different strokes for different folks. So
I think that's an answer for too many people, right? Yeah.
That too is kind of an interesting conversation of what we will do or won't do to make things better. And I'm always, you and I have talked about it so much that my goal is always to start making this thing called health, the achievement of health, easier and easier, and how we can take these little steps and give us some positive results. Because then results then drive
new behavior.
Yeah, our results drive the behavior, and then the more we get better behavior, the more it creates habits and really more rituals. And our rituals are driven by, this is emotionally good for me. This is something I'm passionate about versus just a rule, just a habit per se. So each one of these
also realize it's not so hard. At first when you said that to him, if he's eating lots of sugar and gluten and whatever, he's oh, that sounds terrible. But if he started doing it, a year later, it might not be so hard anymore.
Yeah. And I know when I say that, quite frankly, I know it's like a tidal wave being like, oh my God, I can't eat pizza and beer. Right. And, and I can't have ice cream at night. And I say that. So they're making often, especially with my guys, the guys are knuckleheads. I intentionally say it that way. So they hear themselves say, I'd rather be in pain.
Yeah.
I'd rather be in pain than give up my ice cream. I'd rather be in pain than give up gluten, because I know that anybody, there's so much success of people giving these things up that they could if they want to, but they're going to choose that, those results that they're getting. So, another clinical insight I had, and again, this is real common. I apologize. My dogs are not behaving right now. Maybe my wife will come rescue the day here. Another interesting clinical insight that I had here was really about, it was a little sidebar from this, a little different shift here, but about thyroid testing. And this too comes up, Karen. As we all know, there's, hypothyroidism is very, very common. It's like 10 to 1.
Like almost, especially with women, right? Like it seems like everybody has a thyroid, some sort of thyroid problem.
Yeah, it's about 10 to 1 women to men.
Yeah.
And then within that, Karen, about 50% of the women will have something we call an autoimmune condition. We'll have Hashimoto's.
Yeah.
And it's really, and the reason that this is a clinical insight today is because 2 different times I had people walking with their labs. So most of the time when people come in with labs, I usually set that aside and to do more of like a Zoom call. We can do a deep dive with their labs. Every now and then people come in and say, hey, doc, can you look at this real quick while I'm seeing them for chiropractic or I'm doing something else? And they'll literally they're kind of like, they hand their labs to me right in front of me. And I don't mind. I know labs well enough. I can do a quick look. At the same time, though, when we're creating strategy, sometimes it takes a little bit more time and conversation. Yeah. So she hands them to me, and sure enough, there was like high TSH, which is the kind of standard thyroid marker, but nothing else was there. There was no other like T3 uptake. There was no antibody markers. And this is where not only is it important that we do it, and it's almost, I don't want to use the word dangerous, but it's not accurate to not test those and then still make a decision about your thyroid.
Yeah, because then they just put you on thyroxine, right? Or a hormone, like some sort of medication.
Yeah. So so just having a high TSH, which oddly enough means low thyroid function, low thyroid production. We need to know them all. There's really 9 markers I like to run, including vitamin D, that we at least we get to see the whole picture here. If we don't see the antibodies, what's called TPO, TGOs, thyroglobulin, thyroid peroxidase, if we don't get to see those, we don't know if there's not an autoimmune condition that is affecting the thyroid. And the reason that's such a problem is because if you have an autoimmune condition with your thyroid's being eaten. That's the simplest way for me to say it. And if if you're a woman and you've been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, your doctor has to check these. It's simply not fair for you. You don't know this. So now you do know this. So if you're listening, that we have to test for Hashimoto's, we have to test all the markers. And it's really not an expensive test. We have it. Someone wanted, they could call and be like, I just want to test my thyroid. And that's part of the big female panel that we have. And maybe they don't need to look at all the other stuff. They don't need to look at the cholesterol panels. They just want to know just thyroid. I think that panel's, I think it's about $150. So no, it's not, free, but it's a worthy investment to find out if you have Hashimoto's, because if you do, and that Hashimoto's, and the way that autoimmune conditions work is that when you're not doing good, when you're a little bit weak, that typically that autoimmune condition attacks the body part. And really we kind of diagnose it where it is. So if it's, part of the thyroid, we call it Hashimoto's, and different body parts, we call it different things. Within maybe it's Crohn's, it's in the intestines. Often it's body part specific, what type of autoimmune we call it. And if that autoimmune condition is active and it goes left unchecked, it will destroy that gland or that organ. Then when we see those people down the road, we're doing functional nutrition. We're trying to do things the best that we can through an all natural way. And they show up, but they've had Hashimoto's undetected. for 10 years and it's been, wreaking havoc on their body. In the meantime, all they're doing is just trying to treat it with, thyroxine, Armor, levothyroxine, whatever it may be, whether it's a natural one or not, and they leave those unchecked. Then we get to the point where there's nothing we can do. You're going to be on a medication for the rest of your life and it doesn't mean your thyroid's going to function good. It means you've killed off that thyroid. So making sure that we test properly for that, such an important part. And then just the other flip side, I got these labs today too. Someone came in, they tested just their ANAs, which is a test for a broad scoping antibody test. Cool. Like if it comes positive, you have antibodies. Then they specifically ran the ones for Hashimoto's, and those were positive as well, but no other markers.
So no the TSH, T3,
no
any
no T3s, no T4s, nothing.
Okay.
And that's not really supportive either, because what we'd like to know in that spot, hey, do you still have free T4 or total T4 being produced? Like, can the gland even do it?
Yeah.
So here's a scenario. And the reason I bring that up, because here's a scenario where I'm sure those doctors were doing the best that they can with the knowledge. And I would do the best that I could with that knowledge. The challenge is we can't really do the best thing for that patient without the full complete panel.
Without
so
all the info.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
what if they have, what is that ANA? So if they have a high ANA, but they're not showing positive for Hashimoto's, but they've got high TSH, let's say, or something's happening there.
So the ANA could be a test for any particular, there could be other autoimmune conditions going on.
Okay.
It's not always just that it's Hashimoto's, but we'll often, like, that is often like the precursor, like it'll be run with a lab panel. They'll do an ANA test and be like, oh, you have antibodies, you have autoimmune antibodies taking place. And then you trickle it down and you run a Hashimoto's and say, oh, now we know we did a thyroid peroxidase test. And then, oh, okay, that is an antibody that attacks the workers that are trying to make T4. Okay. And then you say, oh, and then you see this other one called TGOs, and those are for thyroglobulin. And that's like that's the product. That is the actual hormone. So you got the worker that makes a product. And if you have an autoimmune condition that's affecting or attacking either one of those, we got to address those. And now here's the cool thing. It's not that hard to address. You just have to have a specific strategy. So for those individuals, I'll just give you a one particular strategy. You're done eating gluten because gluten will trigger those antibodies. We will trigger that because the molecular structure of the gluten molecule is very similar to that of the antibodies. So your body then tries to destroy it and it ends up in the wrong places. So your body creates this autoimmune condition just by getting the gluten in there. So that's like one strategy. And then the next thing you know, you see these antibodies start to lower. Now, if you didn't know that the Hashimoto's was prevalent, it wasn't positive, you might never stop eating gluten. Your doctor might never mention that to you. And that, Karen, is just one. And then, and even with without going into the exact like protocols, and we've talked about there's one or two different types of herbs that if you have an autoimmune condition, you just become part of your protocol. One of them is called Romania. And Romania is a phenomenal herb if you know you have anything autoimmune condition. That's one to do. If you have autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's, especially anything thyroid, liver, gut, and adrenals always have to be then observed and addressed. Most likely, if you have an autoimmune condition going on with your thyroid, most likely you either have or you've had some type of leaky gut.
Yes.
And we got to start. And that's usually how it started. And we have to kind of reverse engineer that. And then, making sure that the proper mineral uptake, like things like selenium and iodine and all the other ones that we've always talked about are really, really important, and making sure that the diet gets dialed in. Again, not difficult, just a little different sometimes. That's all. Yet it is initially where the victory starts to begin there, is making sure we have the proper tests.
So that we actually know what's going on, whether it is Hashimoto's or whether it is. So if the Hashimoto's negative, but you're still getting high TSH or high other markers.
Yeah. So then we get to go right after it. Then what we do is we break it down. We go, all right, well, what is high, what's low? And what else do we know? So I'll just give you an example. Sometimes we'll see a situation where T4 is there, but there's low T3. So that immediately tells us there's a conversion issue here, and it's not converting in your liver. All right, we got to clean up the liver. And then at those times when we start to help the liver, get a little milk thistle going, get more cruciferous specials going on, help the bile thin out, break things down a little bit. Then all of a sudden, no hormone changes. Like we haven't added anything to the body. We literally get the body, the liver especially, in the situation where it can pull one of those iodines off of the thyroxine hormone and convert T4 into T3. So then we see the T3 levels increase. Sometimes we see low T4, and we say, wow, well, if you don't have iodine in the body, you can't make T4. So sometimes it's just adding iodine. So here's the other part of this, Karen, as well. There's really two more things I think is important to do. If you choose to make some changes, and they have Hashimoto's, you make the changes, and in about 90 to 120 days, you test again. And you test those little 9 markers and see what direction that you're heading into. And often within that time for 3 months is a fair 3 to 4 months is a good time frame to see what direction you're moving into, because we don't really want to wait too long with super high antibodies. The other part of this is kind of the unfortunate, and it's not a blame game here. Oftentimes in the medical world, there's 2 approaches to healthcare. And one is wait and see. Everybody here understands that. They've gone to the doctor and they get diagnosed or kind of diagnosed. We're not sure what's going on here. And then the answer is, let's wait and see. We just saw 2 years of this. Let's wait and see what happens. It's not a good strategy. It's not a strategy. Well, it is a strategy. It's a throw my hands up in the air, I'm not going to take any action strategy. And it's not really cool when it's your own health you're talking about. Like, it's not a strategy I like. Like, it doesn't. And I know for most of the people listening to a podcast like this, that's typically not your strategy either. But understand that exists. And I'm never really a fan of that one, because if you wait and see, but the writing was already on the wall, we know what to expect. And then it stays in the back of your mind. Well, I'm not doing anything about this, but this thing can happen. And just that psychosomatic effect, it becomes real. So that's number one. And then the second part of the traditional medical model is to suppress the aggressor, or what I call suppressing symptoms. Yeah, this could be just as bad. The number one thing we do for autoimmune conditions, especially inflammatory ones, we take steroids.
Yeah. So they give steroids to people diagnosed with Hashimoto's.
Oh yeah, sure. It's an inflammatory. You'll get inflammation that goes with this. Probably not the primary one, but sure, that's part of it.
Steroids have a number of side effects, don't they?
Yeah. You're literally shutting down the immune system. So, and the bummer about that, Karen, too, is that the condition that's beating up the thyroid doesn't stop. It's still there. So it just exists. And if you wean off of them, it continues. And that goes right along with like rheumatoid arthritis and Crohn's and all of the other autoimmune conditions that create these inflammatory responses. It is attack the aggressor or attack the symptoms. So the wait and see model, not awesome. And then, blame the symptom model, not awesome either. So, establish some type of, if you're going to measure, intelligently. So, and nowadays people have been testing and monitoring the thyroid for so long now. And there's a lot of people doing out there very, very successfully. So if you want my help, I'll be happy to help you. Other than that, there's a lot of people out there that can do a really good job as well. So
I've got another question here. They ask, can you still have Hashimoto's if your regular blood panel numbers are normal?
Awesome question. The answer is yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You need to run that specific test for Hashimoto's.
You do. And that's why we put it part of our standard panel. So what's interesting, and I'm glad that question came up, because I blew right by that. You can have a normal TSH and have Hashimoto's.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
it just hasn't affected it enough yet, like at your early stages, or?
It's the 2 different. So we're really measuring 2 different types of antibody responses, and the impact sometimes of when they're both positive can have this effect on TSH where it comes out normal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and here's a situation, and I know there's going to be some women and even some men listening to this go, I like intuitively know something is not right with their thyroid. They have all the signs and symptoms, and it might be brain fog. It might be, I get chilled too easily. I startle. I'm gaining weight that I shouldn't. I'm getting fatigued. I'm gaining weight. All these little things are showing up. Then they test their thyroid, and doctor says, man, it looks pretty good. But they didn't test like all of them. They didn't do another good one is something called T3 uptake, which there's one thing, Karen, to have it all floating around. The other is to find out, does it get into the receptor? Are we getting it to the point where it needs to be? And that's what that T3 uptake is telling us. So it is important that I can't emphasize enough. So if you're going to test thyroid, and I think the reason I keep saying this is that most doctors will run in this general panel. I don't ever know where this came from. They'll run like T4 and TSH, and that's it.
Yeah.
And completely diagnose you off of that. Now, I would understand that when I first started looking at labs a decade ago, what I'm talking about now wasn't as common, but this is common now. Like literally everyone who does functional nutrition or functional medicine would be in complete agreement with me on this, just saying, yeah, you're just from the whole panel. It's easy breezy. There's 9 or 10 markers that you want to run, 8, 9, 10 markers. And then with that, you can make a really good strategic, approach toward what your body's going to need to be healthier.
But also, I mean, what is normal? Because sometimes when you go to a doctor, I mean, I think TSH, can be under 5 or something, and then that's normal. But is it actually, is that going to be showing, you're still going to be showing symptoms potentially? Like what they've put as a normal, is that going to be optimal for your body? Can that affect these kind of results too, where you're coming up normal, but that's because of what normal is?
Yeah. So that's a big time question in conversation. So that's real, because you literally can fall into normal. You're not nearly normal. It's the writings all over the wall that there's a dysfunction taking place. So for example, with the TSH, ideal functioning is between about 0.5 up to max about 2.5. Really like to see it fall around 1.5. Now, on the lab itself that comes back in print or on your computer screen, it'll say that it goes from 0.5 to 4.5.
Okay, 4. Yeah.
Yeah, literally, if you have 3.0, 3.7, 4.0, it's showing up as normal. It's not going to be read in your labs, but that's hypothyroidism.
Yeah, something's going on.
Which is very similar to like a lot of what happens with liver enzymes. We need to see the trend way before we see it out of balance. So if you just do pick up the paper and look down and just look for the highs or the lows, like the red marks on the labs. I'm not saying anyone does that, but if that's the way that they're practicing lab work and they're looking like, oh, you look good, there's nothing, essentially there's nothing red here, there's nothing high. About looking at the individual values, there's so much more we can dive into when it comes to labs. Speaking of liver, one of the reasons we have our extensive male and female panel is because if there's a thyroid issue, I really love to see what's going on with the liver.
Okay.
And make sure that, and then other inflammatory markers going on. So make sure that things like the simplest things, like your electrolytes are balanced. Yeah. So we forget that the thyroid, part of its job is to filter blood. I think it's every 17 minutes, it filters all the blood in the human body.
Wow.
Yeah. Don't mark that word, but no, I think it's something like that. Yeah. It's something really fascinating like that, right? I think it's every 17 minutes, all the blood in the human body will be filtered by the thyroid. So it has a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Now, if that blood it's oxygen level, things like the hemoglobin, hematocrit, and all those other things are off, that thyroid is going to be working overtime. If you don't have selenium, if you don't have iodine, if you don't have the nutrients that thyroid needs to function, it's going to be getting tired fast, and it'll show up in other areas. So thyroid. So here's another one. TSH is a little bit high. Everything else looking pretty good. Your total cholesterol looks good, but your LDLs are high.
Okay.
A slow functioning thyroid will drive those inflammatory cholesterols up because you can't filter it. So you're producing more inflammation, and your body, as a response of inflammation, makes more duct tape. That's what an LDL is. So that's why we like that whole panel. That's when we step back from that view and go, all right, well, let's look at all these little different markers here, which I guess really the second part of this clinical insight is the same exact thing happens with probably the two most obvious things that happens with is testing for the thyroid and testing for cholesterol panels. We should really, it should be a cardiometabolic panel. It should not be just a cholesterol panel. In the fundamental difference, Karen, would be this. A cholesterol panel will probably give you high cholesterol, total cholesterol, HDL, LDLs, if you're lucky, VLDL, and triglycerides.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, that could tell us if those are highs or lows, but it doesn't tell us the why. And especially when it comes to the cholesterol panel, the cardiovascular system, the cardiometabolic panel, we want to be able to answer the question of why high.
Oh, but so many people nobody ever asks why. Yeah. Like, it drives me crazy how many, I don't know, you always come back with something and nobody ever asks why. And then sometimes you get into a situation where obviously I ask why a lot. Nobody wants to answer my why anyway, depending on the doctor.
Well, I'm gonna work on the other side of that and defend it for a moment. So the reason is because they work in a system, and the system is not designed to explain the why, but then how to fix the why. Yes. There's no time for it and there's no money for it. So that's in a nutshell. So let's just say we have high total cholesterol, high triglycerides. Why? If it's triglycerides, it's dietary. It's your diet. There's something wrong with your diet. You're eating McDonald's too much canola oil in your life, too much fried food, French fries. But no, doc, really, I eat really good. Okay, then you have a fatty metabolism issue. Maybe you got fatty liver disease. Let's check all the other enzymes. But we didn't run those enzymes. That's a problem. Yeah. So we need to know those other inflammatory markers. So in cholesterol, for example, so the why high has to be asked before we step back. And this is the challenge with labs too, that a lot of people kind of like, they're nervous about them. And I understand they're not the language that everyone speaks. So if you get a piece of paper or it shows up on your computer and someone points to the red mark,
they do.
And it says hi. And then, and they show up like right now, they show up, there's like these little triangles, like alarms. Yeah. And there's like red, and then there's like another one that's scary or somehow, and it's like a different, like alert, like danger. Literally, that's how they show up on the labs. If that shows up, if you're human, you're like, oh my goodness, alarm, alert, like, hi, not good. What do? I must make it go down. That's where we become, as I meant earlier, suppress the aggressor, suppress the symptom. And in the cholesterol world, this is a very, very slippery slope, I almost want to call it dangerous slope, because we need cholesterol to make fundamental stuff like hormones. And if we don't run the proper panel, if we're going to, have an analysis, let's do it adequately. So in my office, of course, I have a male and a female panel, an elaborate one. And in that is a cardiovascular panel. There's also a diabetes panel. There's a hormone panel. There's a thyroid panel, so that we can break them down. Yeah. And if we're just trying to do the cardiovascular panel. So I'll give you a couple of things for the listeners. If you want to chat with your doctor, or you have labs that you're sitting on right now and you're looking on your computer, and some of the things that we want to see with your cholesterol way before we make a decision, whether you're going to take like a statin or change your diet or whatever it may be, you want a couple other things. You want to have a marker called C-reactive protein. It'll just called CRP. Usually that should be between 0 and 3. Closer to 0 is better. It's not supposed to be high. That means you have potentially inflammation on the inside of your arteries. That tells us we got to change the game here. Something's going on. And that could be too much sugars in there, too much junk, too much drugs. It could be something, but something is damaging the arterial wall. And as a result of that, it'll probably drive LDLs up. And again, that's why we've got a why high. So if your LDLs are high and we know that CRP is high, we know there's damage on your arterial wall, your risk has just gone up relative to someone who has just high triglycerides, but LDLs aren't high. We just say, this is a bad diet. We got to change your diet, buddy.
Yeah.
Right.
It's almost like a warning at that stage then. Hey, you're heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Another marker that we always want to see there with your cardiovascular panel is something called homocysteine.
Okay.
Homocysteine is another marker that I consider it an inflammatory marker. That one's a little bit different. I think the markers the normals go all the way up to about 15. Really, this is another good example. It won't say high until you're above 15, but really anything above about 8, 9 is telling us you're building up inflammation.
Something's happening.
Something's happening. Now, that one is a little bit more indicative of when there are B vitamin deficiencies. So when we run out of B vitamins, we can't make ATP properly, have an issue with energy. Typically, then you're looking for an energy from an outside source, carbs and sugar, and you will drive. So that conversation right there can't be had if we don't see the homocysteine levels.
Yeah.
So, but that's how easy it is for someone that's practicing functional nutrition or functional medicine that, say, hey, Karen, look, your homocysteine levels are up here. Hey, we got to clean up the diet a little. We got to get the sugar and carbs out. We're going to get more B vitamins, take this B vitamins. Or it may say, and you say, well, I'm taking my B vitamins on a regular basis. Well, all right, then maybe we need to do a genetic test for the MTHFR and find out if you need methylated B vitamins. Yeah. So that's when we start to say, all right, let's be a little investigative here, because we know that inflammation isn't our best friend. And again, that could drive up LDLs. But again, if we don't know this information, then there's another one that I like to run in this category. There's others, but there's one called hemoglobin A1C.
Okay.
Which is usually in the diabetes marker, which it is. And so we kind of cram this into the cardiometabolic panel, because if your hemoglobin A1C, which is really a measurement of your blood sugar, it's kind of like doing a broad spectrum over the course of 3 months. What were your blood sugar levels at? If we know those are high, you start getting into that pre-diabetic phase of like 5.6, 5.7, 5.8, 6.0, 7, 8. If you get into that, we know you're going to produce inflammation. Yeah. And then we're going to see that cholesterol panel change. So, when I stop and look at the mistakes I think that are made sometimes with labs, or the false securities they can give us sometimes, they're so easy to fix. And the beauty is when you do them right, you can really create some life-changing strategies that aren't that difficult. We just needed to see the whole panel.
Yeah, you just need to be able to take the information and actually look at the why and what are some things that we can do to help it, rather than take a small snapshot and just treat the symptom.
Yeah, and that's it's it's never convenient to do labs, and that's always like I'm always like, oh, when I see the labs, if they're not like enough of it, like I know they did their best, like they were taking a total action for their health. They're like making, they're leveling up. They're doing their best. They go to their doctor unbeknownst. And it's not your responsibility as the patient to know what labs to run. Although, if you're listening to this podcast, you're definitely seeking higher levels of health. You are definitely seeking knowledge and information that you can put into action. And I will tell you, it's not that difficult. Literally, and I don't care. You could call my office. We will email it to you. You don't even have to run the lab with me. But they can reach out to us. I'll just have your doctor run these panels. And however that relationship happens, that's cool. Like we got one today, a request of saying, why you want all this information? I can't answer that to the person that's asking it.
Yeah, because if they don't know, they're not going to be able to have a look at it. Or really, if they don't know that, they're not going to be able to think about why when they get that result back anyway, are they?
No, and that's the whole idea. So it's just a different conversation, because and often when I'll tell people, look, sometimes people will say, hey, can you run this through my insurance? And this is where it gets a little interesting. Yeah. And the answer is no. And why is because the system requires a diagnosis to identify, this is what's wrong with you, Karen. You have this, that, and the other, and that's justification. You have fatigue, so I'm running a thyroid panel. You have weight gain, so I'm running fatty liver disease. We're not diagnosing. We're looking for strategies to level up. So I know that these are investments that come out of your pocket. When I send you a list and what you and your doctor do with them, if you run them through your insurance, that has nothing to do with me, I'm fine. I'll still review your labs with you, but how you go about them getting paid through insurance, I'll just send you the list. That part is kind of on you. And that's really where things are moving. Unfortunately, many of the lab companies, I feel like they're doing a better and better job with helping it making things a little bit more affordable.
Yeah.
When it comes to cash pay, I feel like they're doing a better job. I know when the same panels that we run go through insurance, they're literally so much more expensive. So we've been able to create some good relationships with specifically LabCorp. They've done a really nice job with us, and they let me design my own panel and then give us what I consider very fair, a fee structure to it.
Yeah. And I mean, this is information that can really help you create strategies that can change your life. Like, you don't need to run it every month or anything, right? Like, in terms of the investment.
No. So the one, like our full blown, the people, like a lot of people right now, they did the cleanse and they're running their annual panel. So yes, and I think once you hit around 40, an annual panel is a worthy investment.
Yeah.
Our bodies start to change because they got 4 decades of beatdown. So, and I'm never going to blame age. I'm just going to call it the compounding effect of beatdown.
Yeah.
So having an eye on the direction that things are going to, and once a year is great. I do it more than that. When people ask me, so I run my labs at least 3 times a year.
But you like to know, right?
I like to know it. It motivates me. It makes sure, I like that feeling. I don't, Karen, I don't have a lot of people holding me accountable for my health. When I run a lab and I see that, man, all right, I go back off this, or it just gives me information. And for us guys, there's a lab, I don't talk about it much here, but there's a simple mark I run for all the guys is PSA. And that's the antibody for prostate. And hey, listen, guys, we got to know what's going on there. And the moment it starts to trend, that's when you take serious action. If you wait and see, that's a great example of when you're really going to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gone up a little bit, Bart. Let's see in a year or two, we'll retest this. Nope. And that's one of the reasons I run mine often. I want to know that what my PSA is doing. And if I keep it in like under 0.1, I love it. But the moment I see it trending in a direction, I will hunker down, create strategies, and make some changes to that. And that's how I feel about the thyroid as well. If we see the trend where it's going in, cholesterol panel, quite frankly, to me is very, very easy. And I've talked about that in the show. I'm back into, I just got my labs back last week, and I think I'm in a total is like 180. It was in like the 240s. It's literally relatively easy to manipulate that panel in a healthy way. With, in a 30, 60, really cholesterol about 90 days, thyroid about 90 days. And that's usually when I test it. And if I want to like intentionally change something, you can do that. But if you have Hashimoto's, I'm going to recommend in the beginning until you see it really stabilize and trend in your favor, about 90 days, 90 to 120 days. And when I say trend in your favor,
or that ANA marker, does that go down? Like, will that change?
Yeah. The Hashimoto's mark. So I've seen some people as high as the 1500s, and then we want to get them under at least back under 100, and then back under 50, back under 30.
Okay. Because that's measuring the antibodies.
Correct. Active antibodies. Correct. But it takes a little time to do that. Yeah.
So if we take those strategies, we can get those antibodies down, and that's what you're then measuring in 90 days.
And then the beauty of that, Karen, too, is if you're taking a strategy and you're doing things 90, 120 days, you then get to say, all right, my strategy is working. I want it to work faster, or this is working good. And I won't test again for 6 months because I'm sticking with the action.
Yeah. And I'm in the right direction.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're almost out of time. So what is so much to talk about in these two things. I think it's really good to talk about, though, because as you said, so many people do. We run labs with our doctor and think that we're getting the information we need. And unless we know what questions to ask our doctor, we can only take that information, right? Like, we need to be accountable for our own health and know what questions to ask, because otherwise we're not asking for what we need to be able to make decisions about our health.
Yeah. And that's, and I think about what eventually you're going to ask me, what's my one action, one action step. And I'll tell people, continue to take your health into your own hands, and then choose the team that's going to best support you.
Yeah. And it can be a team, right? Yes. It doesn't have to be one practitioner. Like, get a team, I would love practitioners to work together more. How great would that be? You know, I've had people going through certain things where they've come to see one practitioner. I've seen them there and they're like, oh, I have to like lie to the other practitioner because he gets like unhappy if I go see a different practitioner like that. You know, we could take all the strategies to
100%. And I think that the approach, and I want to make sure everyone listens, that I in no way, shape, or form are ever trying to play bad guy, good guy, or bad cop, good cow. Yeah. Everyone that's in healthcare has a tremendous, difficult job because every human being is different. And I truly believe that every man and woman are doing the best they can with the tools and the circumstances that they have. And there are amazing people out there in the deep of the true like medical healthcare. And we need everybody. Yes, we need people we need personal trainers. We need people doing supplements, vitamins, and herbs. We need people that are doing diagnostic tests that are really good at analyze. We need radiologists. We need all of that. And because science and technology and sharing information and being human to each other, that's where we can really use science to help us level up. And for us to be advocates of our own health. So I think if I was to leave one message tonight, is be your best health advocate.
You already answered my last question. So
be an awesome health advocate for yourself. We had an opportunity to meet some other practitioners recently, my wife and I, and the beauty is that, like, so for example, when I go into another place, I don't even tell them I'm a doctor.
Yeah.
I listen, I show up, I'm in your playground. How do we play the game? And to have that approach, I think is very, very important for all of us, even if your philosophy is a little bit different. So for example, if I'm in the medical world, I know that they're probably going to recommend drugs and surgery. That's what they do. I can't frown upon them or think they're going to all of a sudden change their mode because I've walked in the door. And it would be that would be unfair expectations, ones they'll never be able to meet. So remember that man or woman that is, you know, you're making part of your team, make them your friend.
Yeah, for sure.
Make them trustworthy.
But on the other side of that, don't be intimidated either. Like, it is your health. Like, so, you know, they will be their friend. Like, you don't exactly like go in with an open mind to what they're going to say. But at the same time, you get to make the decision. You don't need to be intimidated by anyone. No.
And there's some truth behind the fact that a lot of doctors are claimed to have big egos. So we do like that, you know, a lot of us think we know it all. I'm probably falling in that category. I don't know. So it is okay to question, and it is actually important that you do. And especially, you know, if you're spending your time listening to a conversation like this for, you know, half hour or an hour, you're obviously a health advocate of yourself and you continue to level up. The next step for you to be allowing yourself to take that data and that information into the next realm and use it for yourself, your spouse, your friends, and family. So that being said,
see what resonates for you. And it might be this person or it might be this person, right? It doesn't have to be one way or another. So I love that. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us again for another episode of the Health Made Simple show. We will be back same time, same place next week for another episode.
Yes. And of course, thank you guys for showing up and keep doing things, keep sharing it out, keep spreading love. You know, really never know who might just be able to listen to something like this and be like, oh, take that one action and really kind of move their life in the right direction. So keep doing your thing. Obviously, we're going to keep taking deliberate action for your mind, your body, overall wellness. That'll be awesome.